Hi everyone, welcome to our channel, KQ, Sci-May. Douglas Macgregor has expressed concerns regarding the current state of our economy, particularly highlighting the minimal manufacturing sector. He emphasizes that a significant portion of our manufacturing is geared towards military equipment, which now constitutes a notable portion of our gross national product. This observation echoes sentiments expressed by both Secretary Blinken and President Biden in their recent addresses. Furthermore, Macgregor points out the dangers associated with maintaining unnecessary military presence worldwide. He argues that increased spending in such endeavors not only attracts attention, but also the wrong kind. Current situations in Syria and Iraq serve as examples where troops lack clear missions, thus becoming targets for attacks. This raises questions about whether such deployments are inadvertently drawing us into larger conflicts that could otherwise be avoided. In the summer of 1940, when the fleet completed its exercises, typically involving simulated battles resembling those with the Imperial Japanese Navy, a crucial decision was made by Franklin Roosevelt to keep the fleet stationed at Pearl Harbor. Traditionally, the fleet would return to Pearl Harbor and then proceed to their permanent bases from Puget Sound down to San Diego as desired by the admirals. However, Roosevelt insisted on keeping them in place. Despite concerns raised by the Chief of Naval Operations C&O at the time about the fleet becoming vulnerable targets, especially with the concurrent oil embargo announcement, Roosevelt believed their presence would act as a deterrent against potential aggressors. Nevertheless, history proved otherwise, with the stationary fleet eventually becoming a target, leading to the infamous attack on Pearl Harbor. There seems to be ample evidence supporting this perspective, considering the situation in Iraq and Syria today. Another pertinent example from that era was the Philippines, particularly Manila and Corregidor, which were under scrutiny for defense strategies. Despite public assurances of their defensibility, private sentiments, including those of figures like MacArthur and George, suggested otherwise. Marshall expressed the urgent need to withdraw forces from the vulnerable position, emphasizing the impossibility of defending against Japanese aggression. Despite initial attempts to maintain neutrality, when it became clear that neutrality wasn't an option, Franklin D. Roosevelt committed resources to defend the area, resulting in a disastrous outcome. These strategic decisions marked the beginning of the United States' involvement in the Second World War with catastrophic consequences in the Pacific theater. Indeed, there are justifications for maintaining overseas bases, many of which are classified due to their role in intelligence gathering and global communications support. However, the sheer number of forces deployed overseas, possibly exceeding 300,000, necessitates reconsideration in the modern era. The proximity of these bases to potential adversary series poses significant risks, far more pronounced than those faced in the past. Recent events, such as the withdrawal of carrier battle groups from the Mediterranean and Indian Ocean, highlight logistical challenges and vulnerabilities associated with forward deployment. Losing strategic facilities like those in Bahrain could severely impact naval operations, not only in the Persian Gulf, but also in the broader Indian Ocean region. These realities underscore the evolving nature of warfare and the need for prudent decision-making to avoid learning the hard way. The questions raised by President Trump echoed concerns that I addressed. The prolonged presence in various locations spanning decades, including Korea and Okinawa, beg the question of necessity. Much of this extended presence seemed driven by inertia and complacency, where the passage of time normalized the existence of these bases within bureaucratic structures. They became entrenched as part of the mission framework, offering tasks to expand command structures and keep personnel occupied. However, proposing to vacate hundreds of overseas bases elicited strong reactions, revealing the depth of attachment to these establishments. Similar sentiments apply to our presence in Europe, particularly in Germany. Claims of deterring Russian aggression seem dubious, especially in light of recent events in Ukraine. The reality suggests that our continued presence might inadvertently fuel tensions among our allies and neighboring countries. Reflecting on historical parallels, such as the challenges faced by the British Empire post-World War II, underscores the dangers of complacency, neglect, and ego in maintaining overseas commitments. Just as the British Empire found itself financially strained and forced to retreat from certain territories, we face similar dilemmas today. It's imperative to reassess our global posture and avoid clinging to outdated notions of presence and influence. Assuming NATO maintains cohesion leading up to the election, though there's uncertainty regarding its longevity given ongoing challenges within NATO and the EU, particularly in recent years, I believe NATO's survival until 2025 is possible. In such a scenario, if I were to advise the President, I would outline terms for our continued participation in the alliance. Firstly, I would propose appointing a European four-star general as the Supreme Commander of Allied Power Europe. Secondly, I would recommend the withdrawal of our forces, urging European nations to become their own first responders in security matters. While we can offer support if needed, it's essential to avoid a scenario where a major power like the United States inadvertently dictates the military capabilities of smaller allies. History, such as the fate of the Tsar of Russia in 1914 when he intervened in support of Serbia, serves as a cautionary tale. We must exercise discernment in our commitments to prevent similar outcomes. By conveying these terms, it's likely that European nations would prefer self-reliance over continued U.S. presence. This approach acknowledges the importance of supporting our allies while recognizing the need to focus on domestic priorities. It's striking to observe the prevailing fear of a potential Russian threat in certain regions, despite the lack of any tangible indication of such intentions from Moscow. Even when pointing out the absence of Russian forces interested in invading neighboring countries, the hypersensitivity to this perceived threat that persists. The recent deployment of some of our forces in Finland with potential plans to station missiles there only exacerbates tensions and turns Finland into a target for Russian scrutiny and potential attack, which I find counterproductive. While it seems that some, like the Poles, are beginning to realize the lack of a genuine Russian threat, there remains a narrative perpetuated by globalist elites or neocons that insist otherwise. This continual portrayal of Russia as an imminent danger is becoming increasingly absurd. While acknowledging these shortcomings privately, there's a reluctance to admit failure publicly, as it would imply a bankruptcy of strategy and objectives. The notion of making Russia miserable or overthrowing Putin lacks concrete substance and has proven to be more of an emotional response than a strategic approach. The reality is that Russia has primarily consolidated its presence in areas with Russian-speaking populations with defensive measures in place. However, the willingness of Ukrainian forces to engage in conflict, often at the behest of external advice, exacerbates tensions further. Despite this acknowledgement behind closed doors, there's a reluctance in Washington to publicly admit to any missteps. However, this discrepancy between public rhetoric and private recognition only serves to highlight our vulnerabilities and weaknesses on the global stage. Our efforts encompassing equipment, technology, advice, and on-the-ground assistance have proven futile against Russian adversaries. Instead of achieving our intended goals, we've inadvertently bolstered Russia's prestige, power, and global influence, a stark contrast to our stated objectives. While initially, many individuals may have supported these endeavors, an increasing number are coming to two realizations. Firstly, Europe, akin to us, is grappling with internal challenges that threaten its stability. The decision to open borders and accommodate millions of individuals who do not align with European values has exacerbated these internal tensions. Secondly, by participating in what is perceived as a misguided campaign against Russia, Europe has further harmed itself economically and politically. This damage is evident across various sectors, with economies crumbling under the strain. Moreover, Our own failures to enforce laws and secure our borders are compounding these issues, domestically undermining societal cohesion and endangering the fabric of our nation. This self-inflicted harm far outweighs any potential threats posed by external adversaries like Moscow or Beijing. In essence, the ineptitude of our actions is a spectacle for the world to witness, leaving little need for our adversaries to actively engage in undermining us when we are doing a sufficient job of it ourselves. Certainly, the recent events didn't catch anyone by surprise. Many members of the House and several senators voiced objections, citing the unconstitutional nature of bypassing legislative processes. There was a firm stance that unconditional support, akin to a blank check, wasn't an option for anyone. However, the narrative that Israel merits unconditional support due to shared adversaries persists, echoing sentiments of dehumanization, reminiscing of past conflicts like World War II, particularly towards Arabs in the Middle East and Muslims at large. This predisposition to accept government narratives without much critical thought underscores the challenges we face. The ability to dehumanize a particular group allows for compliance with policies like Mr.